The morning mist hung heavy over the Gloucestershire countryside as Detective Inspector Sarah Morrison received the call that would change everything. Her phone buzzed at exactly 6:47 a.m., jolting her from a restless sleep. The voice on the other end belonged to Chief Constable Williams, and his tone carried an urgency she had rarely heard in her 15 years of service. "Sarah, we need you at Raymill House immediately. This is classified at the highest level. Come alone and tell no one where you're going." Raymill House was Camilla's private retreat, a Georgian manor house nestled in the rolling hills of Gloucestershire. It was her sanctuary away from the public eye, where she could tend her beloved gardens and find peace from the constant scrutiny of royal life. Sarah had driven past the estate countless times but never imagined she would be called there on official business. As her unmarked police car wound through the narrow country lanes, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. What could possibly require such secrecy at the Queen Consort's private residence? The security protocols surrounding the royal family were unlike anything else in her experience, and the Chief Constable's insistence on discretion suggested something far more serious than a routine security check. The first sign that something was amiss came when she spotted the additional security vehicles discreetly positioned along the perimeter road. Black Range Rovers with tinted windows sat at strategic points, their occupants invisible but undoubtedly watching her approach. The usual single police patrol that monitored the area had been reinforced threefold. Yet everything appeared deliberately low-key to avoid attracting attention from the media or curious locals. At the main gates, Sarah was met by Commander James Fletcher of the Metropolitan Police's Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit. His face was grave as he checked her credentials with unusual thoroughness. Fletcher was a man she knew by reputation, decorated, trusted, and utterly loyal to the crown. If he was personally overseeing this operation, the situation was indeed extraordinary. "Inspector Morrison, thank you for coming so quickly," Fletcher said as he escorted her through the gates. "What I'm about to show you must remain absolutely confidential. The implications could be devastating if this information were to leak." They walked in silence along the gravel driveway, past Camilla's prize-winning rose gardens that were just beginning to show their spring blooms. The manor house stood majestically before them, its honey-colored stone walls glowing in the early morning light. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a picture of tranquil English, countryside perfection. But these were not normal circumstances. Fletcher led her around to a side entrance that Sarah noticed had been recently fitted with additional security measures. New cameras watched their every move, and the door itself bore signs of recent reinforcement. Inside, the house was unusually quiet. None of the usual staff could be seen, and the silence felt heavy with unspoken tension. "The situation began 3 days ago," Fletcher explained as they walked through corridors lined with family photographs and personal mementos. "During a routine security sweep of the premises, our team discovered something that should not have been here. Something that has been missing for nearly 2 years. They entered what appeared to be Camilla's private study, a cozy room filled with books, fresh flowers, and personal treasures collected over a lifetime. But Sarah's attention was immediately drawn to a mahogany display case that stood open, its contents carefully laid out on the desk beside it, even in the soft morning light filtering through the mullioned windows. The jewels sparkled with an intensity that took Sarah's breath away. She recognized them immediately from the countless photographs that had circulated after their disappearance. The flame lily brooch, a stunning piece featuring rare pink diamonds that had been a wedding gift to the late Queen Elizabeth. The Cambridge emerald choker, worn by generations of royal women. And most significantly, the Queen's personal diamond tiara, a piece she had treasured above all others. "These are the missing jewels from the Tower of London," Sarah whispered. Hardly believing what she was seeing, Fletcher nodded grimly. "Every single piece that vanished during the inventory crisis of 2 years ago. They were found here in Her Majesty's private residence, hidden in a concealed compartment behind what appeared to be an antique bookcase." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The disappearance of these priceless pieces had caused a scandal that had rocked the monarchy to its core. Accusations had flown, investigations had been launched, and several loyal servants had lost their positions under a cloud of suspicion. The mystery had never been solved, and the jewels were presumed to have been stolen by an international crime syndicate. But here they were, in the most unlikely place imaginable. "How is this possible?" Sarah asked, her mind struggling to process the discovery. That's exactly what we need to determine, Fletcher replied. The Queen Consort is as shocked as anyone. She claims to have no knowledge of how these items came to be on her property. But as you can imagine, the situation is extremely delicate. Sarah studied the scene more carefully. The hidden compartment had been expertly concealed, requiring considerable skill and planning to install. The bookcase mechanism was sophisticated, operated by a hidden switch that would be impossible to discover by accident. This was not the work of an amateur. Who else knows about this discovery? She asked. A handful of people at the very highest levels of security and government, Fletcher answered. The Prime Minister has been briefed, as has the private secretary to the King. But until we understand what happened here, this information cannot go any further. As Sarah examined the display case and its surroundings, she noticed something else that seemed significant. The books on the nearby shelves were not randomly arranged. They appeared to be a carefully curated collection focusing on British history, royal genealogy, and surprisingly, several volumes on jewelry design and gemstone evaluation. Commander Fletcher, she said slowly, I think we're looking at something much more complex than a simple theft. Someone with intimate knowledge of this house, access to the Queen's personal spaces, and expertise in both royal jewelry and concealment techniques, has been operating here. The question is whether Her Majesty was an unwitting victim or... She let the sentence hang in the air, unable to voice the alternative possibility that would shake the monarchy to its very foundations. Fletcher's expression remained unreadable, but Sarah could see the weight of responsibility in his eyes. Whatever the truth might be, they would need to uncover it quickly and quietly, before the discovery became public knowledge and triggered a crisis that could damage the crown irreparably. The investigation began in earnest the following morning, when Sarah returned to Ray Mill House with a small team of trusted specialists. The official story was that they were conducting a routine security assessment, but everyone involved understood the gravity of what they were really investigating. The future of the monarchy itself could hang in the balance. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a forensic expert specializing in art and antiquities crimes, arrived first. Her reputation for discretion was as impeccable as her credentials, having worked on several high-profile cases involving stolen cultural artifacts. As she carefully examined each piece of jewelry under specialized lighting equipment, her expression grew increasingly puzzled. Inspector Morrison, she said after nearly an hour of meticulous examination, these pieces show signs of recent cleaning and maintenance. Professional-grade care, the kind provided by royal jewelers. But there's something else. Microscopic scratches on several settings suggest they've been handled frequently, not stored away in hiding. The implications were troubling. If the jewels had been stolen and hidden, they should have shown signs of neglect or amateur handling. Instead, they appeared to have been carefully maintained by someone with expert knowledge of their care requirements. Meanwhile, Technical Sergeant Robert Chen from the Digital Forensics Unit was examining the security systems throughout the house. What he discovered added another layer of mystery to an already complex situation. The surveillance cameras covering the area where the jewels were found had experienced a series of brief malfunctions over the past 18 months. Technical glitches lasting just long enough to prevent recording, but short enough to avoid triggering automatic maintenance alerts. Someone with detailed knowledge of our security protocols has been manipulating the system, Chen reported to Sarah privately. This isn't the work of an outsider. Whoever did this had to have intimate access to the technical specifications and maintenance schedules. As the day progressed, Sarah began conducting discreet interviews with the household staff. The challenge was gathering information without revealing the true nature of the investigation. She presented herself as reviewing security procedures following a minor incident, careful not to mention the discovery of the jewels. Mrs. Margaret Thornton, the head housekeeper who had served Camilla for over a decade, proved to be particularly observant. In her late 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp blue eyes, she had worked in royal households since her early 20s and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of household routines. There have been some unusual occurrences over the past year, she admitted after Sarah had gained her trust. Several times I've arrived at work to find things slightly out of place in Her Majesty's study. Nothing obviously wrong, mind you, but when you've been caring for the same rooms for years, you notice when a book isn't quite where you left it or when dust has been disturbed. Sarah pressed gently for more details. Did you report these observations to anyone? I mentioned it to Mr. Harrison, the estate manager, but he suggested it might be Her Majesty herself moving things about. I didn't want to seem like I was questioning her habits, so I let it go. Mrs. Thornton's voice carried a note of regret. Perhaps I should have been more insistent. David Harrison, the estate manager, painted a different picture when Sarah interviewed him later that afternoon. A man in his early 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to responsibility. He seemed defensive when questioned about household security. Mrs. Thornton tends to be rather particular about details, he said, with a slight edge to his voice. Her Majesty values her privacy, and I've always instructed the staff to respect that. If she chooses to rearrange her personal belongings, that's entirely her prerogative. But Sarah noticed something in his manner that didn't ring true. His answers came too quickly, too smoothly, as if he had prepared for such questions. When she asked about his background and how he came to work for the royal household, Harrison's responses became even more rehearsed. I came highly recommended from the Duchy of Cornwall offices, he said. My references were thoroughly vetted through the usual channels. That evening, Sarah called Commander Fletcher with a request that she knew would be sensitive. I need to see David Harrison's employment file and security clearance documentation. Something about his responses today doesn't sit right with me. Fletcher's silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough for Sarah to wonder if the connection had been lost. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. That information is classified at a level above your current clearance, Inspector. However, I can tell you that all household staff undergo the most rigorous background checks possible. Sir, with respect, someone with inside knowledge has been operating within this household for months, possibly years. If we're going to solve this case, we need to examine every possibility, no matter how uncomfortable. Another long pause. I'll see what I can do. But Sarah, you need to understand that we're walking through a minefield here. Every step we take could trigger consequences we can't predict or control. That night, Sarah lay awake in her small hotel room in the nearby village, her mind racing through the evidence they had gathered. The professional maintenance of the jewels, the sophisticated security bypasses, the subtle disturbances noticed by the housekeeper, and Harrison's defensive responses all pointed toward an inside job. But the audacity required to hide stolen royal jewels in the Queen Consort's own home suggested something beyond ordinary theft. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stop digging before you uncover something that will hurt innocent people. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Sarah's blood ran cold. Someone was monitoring their investigation closely enough to know exactly what they were pursuing. The message suggested that the theft of the jewels was connected to something larger and more dangerous than anyone had realized. She immediately called Fletcher's secure line, but it went straight to voicemail. The feeling of isolation was overwhelming. She was investigating a case that could topple the monarchy, with limited resources and now someone actively trying to intimidate her. But Sarah Morrison had not earned her reputation by backing down from difficult cases. If anything, the threatening message only strengthened her resolve to uncover the truth. Whatever secrets lay hidden at Raymill House, she was determined to bring them to light, regardless of the consequences. The next phase of the investigation would require even more delicate handling, as she began to suspect that the theft of the jewels was merely the tip of a much larger iceberg. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 3 days after receiving the threatening message, Sarah was contacted by a former Royal Protection officer named Michael Garrett. He had served with distinction for 22 years before retiring. Early due to a back injury sustained during a security incident, his call came to her personal mobile at 7 in the morning. Inspector Morrison, I understand you're investigating something sensitive at Raymill House. I have information that might be relevant, but I can't discuss it over the phone. Can we meet somewhere private? They arranged to meet at a quiet pub in the Cotswolds, far from any royal properties or potential surveillance. Garrett arrived first, choosing a corner table with clear sightlines to all entrances. Despite his retirement, the habits of protection work died hard. He was a solid man in his early 50s, with graying hair and the alert eyes of someone who had spent decades watching for threats. What I'm about to tell you could end careers and destroy lives, he began without preamble. But after what happened to those good people who lost their jobs over the missing jewels, I can't stay silent anymore. Sarah leaned forward, sensing that they were finally approaching the heart of the mystery. 2 years ago, just before the jewels went missing, I was assigned to a special detail. Very hush-hush, involving the transport of certain valuable items from official royal collections to secure private storage. The operation was authorized at the highest levels, or so we were told. Garrett paused to take a sip of his coffee, his hands steady despite the weight of what he was revealing. David Harrison was the one who coordinated these transfers. He had official documentation, proper authorization codes, everything appeared legitimate. Several pieces from the Tower of London collection were moved to what we understood to be a secure facility for cleaning and restoration work. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. But they weren't actually taken for restoration? That's what I started to suspect, but by then I was dealing with my injury and medical leave. When the theft was announced publicly, I tried to report my concerns through proper channels, but I was told the matter was being handled by others with higher security clearance. Eventually, I was encouraged to focus on my recovery and retirement. The pattern was becoming clearer. Harrison hadn't stolen the jewels in the traditional sense. He had used his position and forged authorizations to legitimately remove them from their official locations. The sophistication of the operation explained why no alarms had been triggered and no security breaches detected. There's more, Garrett continued. Harrison wasn't working alone. There were at least 2 other people involved, both with access to high-level security protocols. One was definitely someone from the private secretary's office, based on the type of documentation being used. The other, he hesitated. The other appeared to have direct access to the royal family's personal schedules and movements. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If Harrison had accomplices within the royal household itself, the conspiracy went far deeper than anyone had imagined. But why hide the jewels at Camilla's private residence? What was the ultimate goal? Did you ever discover who else was involved? She asked. Garrett shook his head. I tried to investigate discreetly, but I was warned off. My supervisor at the time, Chief Inspector Patricia Wells, made it clear that asking questions about this matter could be career-ending. Shortly after that conversation, I suffered my back injury during what should have been a routine assignment. The suggestion hung in the air between them. Was Garrett's injury really an accident, or had he been silenced in a more direct way? After the meeting, Sarah returned to London with a new understanding of the case's complexity. She needed to verify Garrett's claims and identify Harrison's accomplices, but she also had to be extremely careful about who she trusted with this information. Her first step was to request a meeting with Commander Fletcher, but when she called his office, she was told he was unavailable indefinitely due to a family emergency. His replacement, Deputy Commander Sarah Phillips, was polite but clearly had not been briefed on the investigation. I'm afraid I don't have any information about ongoing operations at Raymill House, Phillips said during their brief phone conversation. Perhaps you could provide me with some background? Sarah realized she was being systematically cut off from her chain of command. Someone with significant influence was working to isolate her and shut down the investigation. The threatening message she had received was just the beginning. Determined to press forward, she decided to conduct her own background research on David Harrison. Using her access to police databases and public records, she began to piece together his history before joining the royal household. What she discovered was disturbing. Harrison's employment history showed several gaps that weren't adequately explained in his official file. More concerning, his previous positions had all involved access to valuable collections. He had worked for a prestigious auction house, a private art storage facility, and briefly for a company that provided security services to wealthy collectors. Each of these positions had ended under circumstances that weren't entirely clear from the public records. There were no criminal charges or obvious scandals, but there were patterns of inventory discrepancies and mysterious resignations that followed shortly after Harrison's departure. Sarah was beginning to understand that she wasn't dealing with a simple theft, but with a sophisticated operation that had been years in the planning. Harrison had carefully positioned himself within the royal household specifically to gain access to the most valuable pieces in the crown's collection. But the question of why the jewels had been hidden at Camilla's residence still puzzled her. Was it intended as a temporary hiding place before the pieces were smuggled out of the country? Or was there a more sinister purpose, perhaps to implicate the queen consort herself in the theft? That evening, as Sarah reviewed her notes in her small flat, she received another message, this time delivered through her building's mail slot. It was a single photograph showing her entering the pub where she had met Garrett, along with a typed note. We know everyone you've spoken to and everything you've discovered. End this investigation now, or face the consequences. The message was accompanied by a newspaper clipping about Garrett's back injury, with certain phrases highlighted. Freak accident, career ending, could have been much worse. Sarah realized that she was not just investigating a theft, she was threatening to expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the royal household. The people behind this operation had already demonstrated their willingness to use violence to protect their secrets, and they were clearly prepared to do so again. But rather than intimidating her, the threats only confirmed that she was getting close to the truth. The question now was whether she could uncover the full extent of the conspiracy before they found a way to silence her permanently. Sarah knew she was running out of time. The threats were escalating, and her official support had been systematically withdrawn. She needed to move quickly to gather evidence before the conspiracy could cover its tracks completely. Her decision to go directly to Camilla herself was risky, but it might be the only way to uncover the truth. Using her remaining official credentials, Sarah requested an emergency meeting with the Queen Consort's private secretary. She crafted her request carefully, suggesting she had uncovered a security threat that required immediate royal attention. Within hours, she received confirmation for a discreet meeting at Clarence's house the following morning. Camilla received her in a small private sitting room, away from the formal state rooms where official business was typically conducted. The Queen Consort appeared genuinely concerned about the security implications Sarah had hinted at in her request. But she also seemed puzzled by the unusual circumstances of the meeting. Inspector Morrison, I understand you have some concerns about security at Raymill House. Please, tell me what you've discovered. Sarah took a deep breath and made the decision to reveal everything. Your Majesty, 3 days ago we discovered the missing crown jewels hidden in a concealed compartment in your private study at Raymill House. We believe they were placed there without your knowledge as part of a sophisticated conspiracy involving members of your household. Staff. The color drained from Camilla's face. For a long moment she sat in complete silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. The missing jewels were found in my home? But how is that possible? I had no idea, so she paused, collecting herself. Inspector, you must understand the implications of what you're telling me. If this becomes public knowledge before we understand what happened, it could destroy everything Charles and I have worked to build. Sarah had expected this reaction, but she was struck by the genuine shock and confusion in Camilla's response. Either the Queen Consort was an exceptional actress, or she truly had no knowledge of the jewels' presence in her home. Your Majesty, I believe you've been deliberately targeted by this conspiracy. Someone wanted those jewels found in your possession, possibly to implicate you in their theft. But we need your help to identify who had the access and opportunity to plant them there. Camilla rose and walked to the window, gazing out at the garden where early spring flowers were beginning to bloom. David Harrison, she said quietly. He's been with us for 3 years, came with the highest recommendations. But lately I've noticed him asking questions about my personal schedule, wanting to know when I'll be away from Raymill House for extended periods. She turned back to Sarah with a look of dawning realization. Last month he specifically asked about the dates for my upcoming state visit to Australia. He said it was for security planning purposes, but now I wonder if he was ensuring the house would be empty for a significant period. Sarah felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to align. Your Majesty, we believe Harrison has been working with accomplices within the royal household. One appears to be from the private secretary's office, and another has access to the family's personal movements and schedules. Camilla's expression hardened. If someone in my own household has betrayed our trust to this extent, they must be found and brought to justice. But Inspector, we must handle this with extreme care. The monarchy cannot survive another scandal of this magnitude, especially one that appears to implicate me directly. That's exactly what I believe this conspiracy is designed to achieve, Sarah replied. By hiding the jewels in your private residence, they've created a situation where their discovery would cause maximum damage to the crown. Regardless of your innocence, Camilla returned to her chair, her composure gradually returning as she processed the full implications of the situation. "What do you need from me to resolve this matter?" "I need access to personnel records for all household staff who have joined in the past 5 years, particularly anyone involved in security arrangements or schedule coordination. And I need your permission to set up surveillance at Ray Mill House to catch the conspirators in the act." Camilla nodded decisively. "You have whatever access you require. But Inspector, I must ask, how many people know about the discovery of the jewels?" Sarah's expression grew troubled. "That's part of our problem, Your Majesty. The investigation has been compromised from the beginning. Someone with high-level access has been monitoring our progress and attempting to shut down the inquiry. Commander Fletcher, who was overseeing the case, has mysteriously become unavailable." "Then we must move quickly and carefully," Camilla said. "I'll personally ensure you have the access you need. But we must find a way to conduct this investigation without alerting the conspirators to our progress." That afternoon, working directly under Camilla's authority, Sarah gained access to comprehensive personnel files that had previously been beyond her security clearance. What she discovered confirmed her worst suspicions about the scope of the conspiracy. Harrison's employment had been expedited through the normal vetting process by someone with the authority to bypass standard security checks. The recommendation letters that had secured his position were signed by officials who, upon discreet inquiry, claimed no knowledge of writing them. More troubling was the discovery that similar irregularities existed in the employment records of Patricia Wells, the chief inspector who had warned Michael Garrett away from investigating Harrison's activities. Wells had been transferred to a high-security position within the Royal Protection Unit shortly after the jewels went missing, despite having no previous experience in that specialized area. The third conspirator proved more difficult to identify, but Sarah noticed an unusual pattern in the scheduling records. Whenever Harrison had requested specific information about Camilla's movements, the requests had been processed through the office of Deputy Private Secretary Amanda Thornfield, a woman with 20 years of impeccable service to the royal family. But when Sarah examined Thornfield's recent financial records, using authority granted directly by Camilla, she discovered several large deposits to offshore accounts that couldn't be explained by her official salary. The amounts were significant enough to suggest either blackmail or payment for services that went far beyond her legitimate duties. As the scope of the conspiracy became clear, Sarah realized that the theft of the jewels was just one element of a much larger operation. The conspirators had spent years positioning themselves within the royal household, gaining access to sensitive information and valuable assets. The plan to hide the jewels at Camilla's residence was designed as the final blow, a scandal that would severely damage the monarchy while providing cover for the conspirators to disappear with their stolen wealth. But there was still one crucial question that remained unanswered. Who was the mastermind behind this elaborate scheme? Harrison, Wells, and Thornfield all appeared to be operatives rather than planners. Someone with even greater access and influence had orchestrated their placement and coordinated their activities. The answer to that question would prove to be more shocking than anything Sarah had uncovered so far. The trap was set with Camilla's full cooperation. Using information that only the conspirators would know, they planted false intelligence suggesting that additional valuable items had been discovered hidden at Ray Mill House and would be moved to a secure location the following evening. The bait was irresistible. If Harrison and his accomplices believed more evidence of their activities might be found, they would have to act quickly to retrieve or destroy it. Sarah positioned herself and a small team of trusted officers in concealment around the estate. They had bypassed normal communication channels, reporting directly to Camilla rather than through the compromised chain of command. The Queen Consort herself had insisted on being present, despite the potential danger, arguing that her presence would be necessary to confront whoever was ultimately behind the conspiracy. The waiting was the hardest part. As darkness fell over the Gloucestershire countryside, Sarah found herself questioning whether their plan would work. The conspirators had been clever enough to operate undetected for years. Would they really be drawn into such an obvious trap? At 11:47 p.m., motion sensors around the estate perimeter detected the first intrusion. A figure dressed in dark clothing was approaching the house from the wooded area to the north, moving with the confidence of someone familiar with the property's layout. Through night vision equipment, Sarah confirmed it was David Harrison, but Harrison wasn't alone. Two other figures were visible making their way toward the house from different directions. suggesting a coordinated approach. One appeared to be a woman matching Amanda Thornfield's build and movement patterns. The third figure was more surprising. It was clearly a man in his 60s moving with the measured gait of someone accustomed to authority. "Do you recognize the third person?" Sarah whispered to Camilla, who was monitoring the approach through a secure communication link from a protected location within the house. There was a long pause before Camilla responded, and when she spoke, her voice carried a note of deep sadness. "I believe it's Sir Anthony Whitmore, the Deputy Private Secretary to the King. He served the royal family for over 30 years. I can't believe he would be involved in something like this." Sarah felt a chill of realization. If Sir Anthony Whitmore was the mastermind behind the conspiracy, it explained how the operation had been so thoroughly protected from discovery. As one of the most senior officials in the royal household, he would have had access to virtually any information and the authority to redirect investigations away from sensitive areas. The three conspirators converged at the side entrance Harrison had used during his previous visits. They worked quickly and quietly, using keys and security codes that should not have been in their possession. Within minutes, they were inside the house and moving toward Camilla's private study. Sarah and her team waited until all three were inside the study before moving to surround the house. They needed to catch the conspirators in the act of accessing the hidden compartment to ensure there could be no denial of their involvement. Through surveillance equipment, they watched as Harrison opened the concealed bookcase with practiced ease. Thornfield stood watch at the door while Sir Anthony examined the space where the jewels had been hidden, clearly searching for additional evidence that might implicate them. "There's nothing here," they heard Sir Anthony say through the audio feed. "Are you certain this information was reliable?" "The source was definitive," Harrison replied. "They found additional documents that could connect us to other missing pieces. We need to search the entire room." It was then that Sarah gave the signal to move in. Her team surrounded the house within seconds, blocking all possible escape routes. Sarah herself, accompanied by 2 armed officers, entered through the main door and moved quickly to the study. "Armed police. Nobody move," she shouted as she burst into the room. The scene that followed was almost anticlimactic after the months of investigation and danger. Harrison immediately attempted to flee toward the window, but found his escape blocked by officers positioned outside. Thornfield collapsed into a chair, clearly overwhelmed by the realization that their operation had been discovered. Sir Anthony stood motionless, his face a mask of resignation and defeat. "Sir Anthony Whitmore," Sarah said formally, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to steal crown property, fraud, and abuse of your official position." As the handcuffs clicked into place, the elderly man finally spoke. "Inspector, you have no idea what you've stumbled into. This goes far beyond a simple theft. There are people involved who will never allow this to come to trial." "What people?" Sarah demanded. "Who else is involved in this conspiracy?" Sir Anthony looked directly at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and regret. "People who believed the monarchy needed to, for its reformed. People who thought that creating a scandal involving the Queen Consort would provide the opportunity to make changes they couldn't achieve through normal channels." The implications of his words hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just about stealing jewels or even discrediting Camilla personally. The conspiracy was aimed at creating a crisis serious enough to force fundamental changes in how the monarchy operated, possibly even threatening the succession itself. "You're talking about a plot against the crown itself," she said. "I'm talking about people who believe that Charles's reign needs to be managed more carefully than previous monarchs. People who thought that compromising his wife would give them the leverage they needed to ensure proper guidance of royal decisions." Before Sarah could question him further, Sir Anthony suffered what appeared to be a heart attack. Despite the immediate attention of paramedics, he died en route to the hospital, taking with him the knowledge of who else might have been involved in the broader conspiracy. Harrison and Thornfield were formally charged and eventually pled guilty to their roles in the theft, but both insisted they had been following orders from Sir Anthony and claimed no knowledge of the larger political implications of their actions. Without Sir Anthony's testimony, it became impossible to determine how far the conspiracy had reached into the government or other institutions. The missing jewels were quietly returned to their proper places in the Crown's collection, and the incident was officially classified as a security matter that could not be disclosed for reasons of national safety. The public never learned how close the monarchy had come to a crisis that could have changed British history. But for those who knew the truth, the questions remained. Who else had been involved in the plot? Were there other conspiracies still operating within the royal household? And most troubling of all, would there be future attempts to manipulate or control the monarchy through similar means? 6 months after the arrest at Raymill House, Sarah Morrison found herself in an unprecedented position. She had been quietly promoted to chief inspector and assigned to a new, highly classified unit within the Metropolitan Police, tasked with investigating threats to constitutional stability. The unit's existence was known only to a handful of people at the highest levels of government, and its mission was to identify and neutralize conspiracies that could threaten the fundamental institutions of British democracy. The investigation into Sir Anthony Whitmore's background had revealed disturbing connections to a network of individuals who had been working for years to position themselves for influence over royal decisions. While most of these connections could not be proven in court, the patterns were clear enough to convince senior officials that ongoing vigilance was necessary. Camilla had emerged from the crisis with her reputation intact, but privately she remained deeply shaken by how close she had come to being destroyed by forces she never saw coming. The discovery that people she had trusted with her safety and privacy had been actively working to undermine her had changed her perspective on royal life in ways that would never fully heal. "I find myself questioning everyone's motives now," she confided to Sarah during one of their regular security briefings. "Every smile seems potentially false, every helpful gesture potentially manipulative. It's a terrible way to live. But I suppose it's the price of understanding how precarious our position really is." The broader implications of the conspiracy had led to a comprehensive review of security procedures throughout the royal household. Background checks were enhanced. Rotation policies were implemented to prevent any individual from maintaining sensitive access for extended periods, and new oversight mechanisms were established to monitor unusual activities or information requests. But Sarah knew that determined conspirators would eventually find ways around even the most sophisticated security measures. The real protection for the monarchy lay not in perfect security, but in the continuing loyalty and integrity of the vast majority of people who served the crown with genuine dedication. The trial of Harrison and Thornfield had been conducted largely in secret, with most proceedings held in closed sessions due to national security concerns. Both defendants received substantial prison sentences, but the details of their crimes were never made public. The official story remained that they had been caught in a routine security investigation involving minor irregularities in inventory procedures. Michael Garrett, the former protection officer whose courage in coming forward had been crucial to solving the case, received a commendation that would remain classified for decades. His back injury, which investigation had revealed was indeed the result of deliberate sabotage to silence his questions, had left him permanently disabled. But he expressed no regrets about his decision to speak out. "Some things are more important than personal safety," he told Sarah when she visited him at his home in Wales. "The crown represents something bigger than any individual, including those of us sworn to protect it. If we don't defend that against corruption from within, what are we really protecting?" The most troubling aspect of the entire affair remained the unanswered questions about Sir Anthony Whitmore's death. While the official cause was listed as cardiac arrest brought on by the stress of arrest, Sarah had noticed several inconsistencies in the medical response that suggested the possibility of induced heart failure. But without concrete evidence of foul play, and given the sensitive nature of the case, further investigation had been quietly discouraged. The suggestion that Sir Anthony might have been eliminated to prevent him from revealing the full extent of the conspiracy haunted Sarah's thoughts. If that were true, it meant the people behind the broader plot possessed resources and ruthlessness that went far beyond anything they had initially imagined. In her new role, Sarah had access to intelligence that painted a disturbing picture of ongoing threats to constitutional stability. There were indications of foreign influence operations targeting key institutions, domestic extremist groups seeking to exploit political divisions, and, most concerning of all, evidence of coordinated efforts to undermine public confidence in democratic governance. The case at Raymill House had been just one example of how sophisticated actors could penetrate even the most secure institutions and work from within to achieve their objectives. The fact that the conspiracy had come so close to success was a wake-up call about vulnerabilities that few people had previously considered. 18 months after the arrests, Sarah received an encrypted message through secure channels that chilled her to the bone. It contained a single photograph of her leaving her apartment that morning, along with coordinates that led to a location where additional evidence about the Raymill house conspiracy had supposedly been hidden. She recognized the message as either a trap or an attempt by someone with knowledge of the broader conspiracy to make contact. Against all protocols, she decided to investigate the location alone, driven by the possibility that she might finally learn the truth about who had really been behind the plot against Camilla. The coordinates led to a remote location in the Scottish Highlands, where she found a small cache hidden among ancient stones. Inside was a collection of documents that proved Sir Anthony Whitmore had indeed been working for a larger organization, with connections reaching into Parliament, the intelligence services, and even the judicial system. The documents revealed that the plot against Camilla had been just one of several operations designed to create leverage over the royal family. Other schemes had targeted different members of the royal household, and some had apparently succeeded in ways that had never been detected or disclosed. Most shocking of all was the revelation that the organization behind these operations was still active and had already begun planning their next major operation. The target this time was to be King Charles himself, through a scheme that would make the Raymill House conspiracy look simple by comparison. Sarah realized that her investigation had not ended with the arrests of Harrison and Thornfield. Instead, it had only revealed the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous threat to the constitutional order of Britain. The people behind these conspiracies had learned from their mistakes and were adapting their methods to avoid detection. As she drove back toward London with the evidence secured in her vehicle, Sarah understood that her life had been forever changed by the discovery of those jewels at Raymill House. She was now part of a secret war being fought in the shadows, where the stakes were nothing less than the survival of the institutions that had defined British society for centuries. The monarchy had survived this particular threat, but Sarah knew there would be others. The price of protecting the crown was eternal vigilance, and she had become one of the guardians standing watch against forces that most people would never even know existed. The missing jewels had been found and returned, but the real treasure, the stability and continuity of British democracy, remained under constant threat from enemies who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals.